We finally got a ceasefire, guys. America abstained rather than blocking it. The Security Council demands an immediate Gaza ceasefire. What are the conditions of the demand? Now, guys, we've finally done it. The United Nations is finally ready to take action. Famously effective United Nations. Let's see. This resolution must be implemented. Failure would be unforgivable. And it's pretty severe language from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Netanyahu said the failure of the U.S. to veto the resolution was a clear retreat from its previous position. That is true, and would hurt Israel's war efforts and bid to release more than 130 hostages still held by Hamas. Our vote does not, and I repeat, that does not represent a shift in our policy, White House spokesperson John Kirby told reporters. Nothing has changed about our policy, nothing. Pathetic. So pathetic, dude. They're so locked in the cuck corner, you know, even when they shift from blocking these UN Security Council resolutions to abstaining. It's like, no, we're not changing anything. Like, Jesus. Ridiculous. Israel canceled a visit to Washington because of this. I'm sure, you know, nothing would have gotten done here anyway. Watch the resolution. Don't mind if I do.
Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/254 please raise their hand?
What the f is on his ear? They all speak different languages, guys. It's the UN. They all have teams of translators who are listening in from an alcove above the Security Council chamber. And they, if they can't speak English or whatever other language is being spoken.
Those against, abstention.
U.S. abstains.
The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2728.
The UN. Everyone in the room is happy. They were all waiting for, flop sweating as they stare at the United States representative.
The Security Council has just passed a new Gaza ceasefire resolution. The U.S. abstained from the vote, still significant though. It did not veto. All other members of the Security Council voted in favor. This comes after the Security Council failed to pass a resolution put forth by the U.S. on Friday. This new resolution was put forth by some of the non-permanent members of the Council. The new text demands an immediate ceasefire leading to a permanent, sustainable ceasefire. It also demands, quote, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and that all barriers are lifted to providing humanitarian assistance needed for Gaza. Those all the issues that have been brewing over this question for...
Well, that's fine. Obviously, if there was going to be a permanent ceasefire, you would also want the hostages to be released. How much weight does this have? Well, it's the UN, so... So are all the non-permanent members of the council who don't get a veto just for show? No. They still vote. They just don't have the veto power. You know, they still weigh in on any vote. But they're not part of the Big Five. So basically nothing will happen? Well, not necessarily. There's a reason why Israel has been so harsh on the UN RWA, and why they've demanded that America shield them as since we're in the Security Council as a permanent member, so aggressively. Yeah, the UN is now Hamas, of course. So Fetterman had a deranged response. That's not surprising. It's appalling that the U.S. allowed passage of a resolution that fails to condemn Hamas. They forgot to put that part in. The UN has always been unwilling to condemn this group of terrorists, cowards, and rapists. We must stand with Israel, stop pandering to political fringe or Hamas apologists. All right. Thank you, Fetterman. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Civilians are dying. Thank you, Fetterman. Does this mean we are Hamas? We've been Hamas for a long time, I feel. We've been Hamas. I got accused of being Hamas since we all raised money to donate to the PCRF back in 2021 after the Israeli missile strikes on across the Gaza City. Has Fetterman condemned Hamas? Perhaps he's pointing the finger at others, so people don't point the finger at him. Has he ever condemned Hamas? Literally one Google search and I found the Secretary General condemning Hamas. Aw, shucks. Well, Anyway, they canceled a visit to Washington. The U.S. was disappointed by the decision to cancel the trip. One U.S. official told CNN scrapping the visit was an overreaction that likely reflects Netanyahu's own domestic political concerns. Yeah, of course. Netanyahu did not communicate directly with Biden over the decision. Can you, are you guys ready for Biden to cravenly, demand or beg attention from Netanyahu after being screened like this? and the president has no plans to phone Netanyahu to discuss the matter, the officials said. Well, that's nice, at least. Separately, Israel agreed to a U.S. proposal on a prisoner-hostage exchange, according to CNN analyst Barak Ravid's reporting on the recent round of talks in Doha. The reported deal could see the release of around 700 Palestinian prisoners, among 100 serving life sentences for killing Israeli nationals, in exchange for the release of 40 Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. We'll see how much action this actually leads to. So what's this thing that was linked to me about Guyana?
October 2023. After 5 months.
Okay, this is Guyana talking about the previous ceasefire proposal that got shut down by China and Russia.
Of war in
relevant?
Gaza and the horrific attacks of 7th October 2023. This council has still not been able to adopt a text that addresses all the dimensions of the conflict in a manner that impacts the situation on the ground and upholds the rule of law. Contrary to some media and other reports, this resolution does not call.
Okay, wait, yeah, this is for the previous one. All right, this is out of date now. There's not really much point in learning about the specifics of the previous ceasefire resolution if this one isn't the one that even got put forward. Looks like Russia and China actually got exactly what they wanted. Their decision to veto the previous one was the correct one because it led to this. I mean, that seems like a pretty obvious dub. I love how narrativized even still that CNN article is. 700 prisoners, 100 serving life sentences for killing Israeli nationals when most of them are women and children. Yeah, also, by Israeli nationals, do they mean civilians or soldiers? Right? Like, nationals, okay, so if you mean soldiers, then they're just equal combatants, or like, what do you mean by that? Yeah, the system for detaining Palestinians is pretty psychotic. Or maybe a lack of a system, you know? Or settlers? Yeah, well, I guess it would depend on who started it. Still, this is really good news. The White House sees the public rift with Israel over UN security resolution as an artificial crisis manufactured by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for domestic political reasons, 3 U.S. officials told My Story and Axios. Yeah, so let's think about this, right? I didn't expect the United States to go ahead and, like, let their hands off the table and allow this to go through, which makes me wonder, to what extent is this being calculated, you know, or planned for by Netanyahu, you know? It's possible that Netanyahu understands that at this point he has been openly fascist for too long. He has sort of lost the mandate of heaven, as it were. The United States is nominally supporting Israel, but we're not providing the kind of, like, zealous support that Netanyahu wants. So maybe he's consolidating. Maybe he's doing some Juche shit, okay? He's gonna, like, pull back and say, like, the United States has abandoned us, you know? And try to rally the domestic base by contrasting their will against that of the rest of the world. It could be like a victim thing. Juche? Like North Korea. It was a joke. Yeah. So he's going even more fascist? Maybe. Is it worth funding Israel if we also get Ukraine aid? It really sucks, but, like, depending on the ratio of money being delivered, I think that's usually acceptable because Ukraine really, really needs money and Israel doesn't. A lot of our support for Israel monetarily is kind of like a virtue signal thing. Israel already has a ton of people and weapons and ammunition. They run low on some types, like Iron Dome, you know, replenishing. But in terms of, like, raw firepower, Ukraine needs it a lot more against Russia than Israel does against Hezbollah or Hamas. Still, it's not great. A U.S. official says the White House was perplexed by what it sees as an overreaction by Netanyahu. 2 hours after Netanyahu announced he canceled the delegation, conservative minister Gideon Saar, what a Star Wars-ass name, said he is resigning and his party is leaving the emergency government. That's interesting. A veteran Israeli minister who joined Netanyahu's emergency unity government after Hamas's October 7th attack said he's been resigned after not being included in the highest level war cabinet. So he's been sidelined then. I wonder if him leaving is going to open the path for more relatively moderate Israeli politicians to leave. Saar was once a rival to Netanyahu in the right-wing Likud party before joining a more centrist bloc led by former military chief Benny Gantz. Entered the emergency government. Gantz became a member of the small form disciplining war cabinet. Yeah, all 2 of them. Yeah, I don't know how many moderates there are in the emergency government. His resignation did not come as a surprise, as Saar had broken up the alliance with Gantz earlier this month. Okay. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Well, not to say it's not a big deal. Maybe it's not like an unexpected, you know, it was obviously going to happen. Centrist is a bit light, is the Israeli version of centrist, the American far right. Centrist is always a relative term, right? Yeah. It's also worth pointing out, of course, that even if the Israeli government is lunatics, you know, The average, even though the average Israeli citizen is also like 50% Hitler, basically, Netanyahu is very unpopular. So the more people indicate public, the more people distance themselves from Netanyahu, the more you compound upon a pre-existing broad bias against Netanyahu. Though I'm pretty sure at this point a significant portion of the Israeli population is probably upset with Netanyahu for not annihilating the Palestinian people faster. Benny Gantz has once said the West Bank is the second best place for Arabs in the Middle East. Oh, that's great. Yeah, what was the first? Oh, the first is the West Bank, of course. Look at this goddamn dork. Only time will tell what the actual consequences for the UN resolution will be. Maybe Hezbollah will be emboldened now that they know they are acting with the mandate of heaven, parentheses, the UN, you know?